Story 1. It was actually a friend, not me. Basically, at his house, he and his brother were allowed in only 3 rooms: their bedrooms and the bathroom. The kitchen, living room, and conservatory were completely off limits. If they wanted water, they had to ask, and a parent would bring a glass from the kitchen. The conservatory was used for family meals, but apparently a lot of the time they just gave the kids food on plates to eat in their room. It really weirded me out as a kid when I went around. I would be greeted by the parents. They would escort me to my friend's bedroom, then close the door behind me. When it was time to leave, my friend had to call for his parents to then escort me out. No idea why they had this rule. The mom didn't work and literally sat at home all day, every day just chain smoking in the living room. Story 2. My mother was in a constant war with the deer that constantly ate her garden and was willing to try every trick she could find to keep them away from her beloved plants. One article she read was that the smell of human urine deters deer. So, for about 6 months, the 3 boys and men in the house were not allowed to pee in the toilet. We had to go outside and pee somewhere around the perimeter of her garden. At night, we had to pee in jugs next to the toilet so she could sprinkle it around her garden the next day. It wasn't as successful as she hoped. The final solution was an 8-foot-tall fence around the entire garden a few years later. Story 3. I wasn't allowed to do anything near a window. My mom was convinced that our neighbors were always watching us, so I had to crouch down whenever I went by a window. Story 4. When I was young, my mom made us go to bed at 6 p.m. I remember the sun being out and hearing kids outside playing. She got married soon after, and the guy had a daughter, so that rule went away. But I really think she just didn't want to deal with us. We spent all day outside playing when we weren't at school and weren't allowed to come in until she called us in for dinner. And then it was baths and bed. I can't imagine just napping, never checking on my kids, and having young kids roaming the neighborhood all day. I had a friend who lived down the street. Her mom was like my second mom. I remember roller skating, falling on my knee, scraping it pretty badly, and her cleaning and bandaging it because I knew I wasn't allowed to go home. On school days, we were in after-school childcare until they closed, so then home, dinner, bed. Story 5. Guests were not allowed to use the upstairs washroom, and by guests, I mean specifically if my siblings or I had friends over. We were not allowed to offer them any food or drinks except water. I am pretty sure my mom just wanted to make my house as inhospitable as possible so that she could destroy those friendships. She thought that friends were a distraction and that studying was all that mattered. Story 6. My parents were hoarders. We were not allowed to mess with their stuff, meaning we could not clean in any capacity. It was a nightmare to live in. My dad died when I was younger, but after my mom died, we had the house and its contents condemned, razed, and sold the land. To this day, mess makes me anxious. Story 7. We were not allowed to cut through the flower bed out front to get to the sidewalk. The rule is perfectly fine. It was just that my mom convinced her young children that a family of dead people would grab your ankles and pull you into the ground for eternity if you set foot in the garden. It absolutely terrified me until I was old enough to know better. Story 8. My parents never let me look at people kissing on television when I was a kid. I'm not sure what they were trying to teach me, but I guess I should thank them for my adult awkwardness in public display of affection situations. Story 9. The most bizarre house rule that I have encountered was at my friend's place, where they had a strict policy of no talking during dinner, not because of any traditional reason, but because their elderly grandmother believed that a mischievous spirit living in the dining room would learn secrets and cause chaos. Story 10. We weren't allowed outside if an adult wasn't home, even into high school. I got off the bus with a group of kids and stood outside chatting with them for a few minutes before going home. A neighbor tattled on me, and I was grounded for 2 weeks. I decided, okay, if I can't stay outside for a few minutes, I'll invite them into the house since no one said I couldn't. Yep, grounded for a month. No wonder I have problems making friends, Mom. Story 11. When my brother and I had a fight, we would be locked in a dog cage in the backyard. If we fought in the car, we would get bagged, and were forced to wear pillowcases on our heads until we reached our destination. Could be 45 minutes up to 4 hours. We laughed about it telling friends, and it only dawned on us how messed up it was when we realized our friends were not laughing. Story 12. My dad built our home with his bare hands. We grew up kind of house poor based on how much my parents sacrificed to get 5 beautiful acres and build a home. So my dad demanded we make things last, which included walking, or rather waddling, down the carpeted hallway edges instead of the middle like a normal person. Because if we walked normally, the carpet nap in the middle would get worn out and look bad. Story 13. If I stepped outside in my socks, even right outside the door for 2 seconds, the socks were considered dirty, and I wasn't allowed back inside unless I was barefoot. Meanwhile, shoes could be worn in the house with no problem. Story 14. If we didn't hang up the phone properly or left it off the hook, we were told the phone police would come and arrest us. We were checking for dial tones religiously to make sure we weren't going to jail. Story 15. Could not walk in the living room. It was vacuumed in stripe patterns so they would know if there were footprints. When I had to vacuum it, I would not turn it on, just push it to draw the stripes. Story 16. Before we could play ping pong, which was in the detached garage, we had to clean any oil or grease spots on the floor with kerosene and a rag. Also, this continued into my mid-20s. We had a code for calling the landline because my stepfather refused to get caller identification long after it was included free on most phone services. Ring 3 times and hang up. Ring twice and hang up. Then our mom or stepdad would pick up the 3rd time we called. Story 17. Hyper-Christian parents were very worried about Satanism in the 90s and early 2000s, so no Pokemon or anything with magic. All my friends played RuneScape and Dungeons and Dragons. Also, no Halloween or anything with monsters. As a parent now, Pokemon is my favorite show to watch with my kid, and Halloween is probably my favorite holiday. Somehow, I haven't tried to summon the devil or performed any satanic rituals. Story 18. Oh, where do I even begin? No cuss words. Not even the word crap. It had to be crud. Couldn't say I don't think so for BS. The acronym for the game, not the actual word. Girls didn't fart. They fluffed. Couldn't say farted. Had to make our beds in the morning, or we were grounded for the entire rest of the day. Couldn't have an attitude, or we would be grounded for weeks at a time. The most strict etiquette when eating. Could not enjoy a meal because you were being constantly criticized. Could not make any messes or leave any personal belongings outside of your bedroom, or else they would be thrown away without consultation. Had to shut lights off when leaving a room, even if you were coming back into the room minutes later. I was grounded a lot. My dad was military, so very strict with just about everything, and any toe out of line got you grounded. Now that he's older, he admits he was too hard on me. Story 19. Not allowed to do homework on the weekends. I was forced to have family TV time instead, where we watched Days of Our Lives, of all things. I would secretly do it after everyone went to bed. Story 20. My dad had severe obsessive-compulsive disorder. He converted our garage into a studio apartment that we were never allowed to enter. He had his own dishes, and if we were ever caught using them, they became family dishes. Even washing them wasn't enough. They were ruined. He boiled the hell out of everything he put on the barbecue. Chicken, ribs, hamburgers, all boiled first. There were lots of cleaning quirks, but I'll leave it there for now. I could go on for days. I thought a lot of these things were just normal stuff until I stayed the night at my first friend's house. He went to the cupboard to get me a cup for a drink. I was like, "You can just use any cup you want?" His mom asked me why I asked, so I told her what my house was like. I remember the look she gave me, and from then on, she always invited me over for sleepovers. We weren't abused at all, but she thought our home life was insane. Story 21. No making funny faces because your face will get stuck like that. No cutting hair at night because the witches will steal it. No drinking coffee because it will stunt your growth. No vacuuming at night because it will suck up the spirits. Story 22. It was my dad's weird rule. We were not allowed to sit on any furniture in the house if we were wearing clothing that had been worn outside. We had to come in and change clothes immediately. No one was a germaphobe. He could never explain it, but that was his thing. It finally stopped when I was about 12, I think. Story 23. We were not allowed to say, "That's not fair," because life is not fair. To this day, I am preoccupied with fairness, equality, and justice to an almost obsessive extent. Sounds like the beginning of a superhero movie, but it's just crippling anxiety. Story 24. My mom always cooked at home. There were 7 of us, and eating out was always too expensive. If we said we didn't like something without trying it first, my mom would make us eat 2 helpings of it. It was okay to say you didn't like something after you tried it, and she wouldn't make you eat it. Only if you hadn't tried it. I thought it was a fair rule. It was unpleasant, but it made our taste buds more adventurous. Story 25. Unless it was for school or I was with one of my parents, my sister and I were never allowed to leave the apartment. We couldn't have friends over, and we couldn't go to friends' houses. Probably why I'm such a homebody now with anxiety issues around people. Story 26. If the fridge door was open, with or without a child kneeling behind it, my dad would body slam it closed. We got a lot of concussions. Probably, Mom didn't believe in hospital visits until pain was present for 3 days, and head injuries were easy to fake, according to her. Story 27. No naps. Not in the car, the house, if you were sick, etc. My dad couldn't nap, terrible sleeper, so we couldn't either. 12-hour road trip. No sleeping in the car and no whining either. Flu? Doesn't matter. I think the only exception was when one of my migraine medications I was trying made me vomit for hours before I'd fall asleep with my head pressed onto the edge of the bathtub, and he'd leave me alone. Basically, if he was awake, you had to be awake. I love naps as an adult. Story 28. Not allowed to walk around in socks without shoes. I got my revenge when I moved into my first nice apartment alone. They came to visit, and I made them take their shoes off at the door. Story 29. This wasn't my house, but a friend across the street. Evidently, his father didn't want us ringing the doorbell or using the front door. So, if we wanted to visit, we were supposed to go around to the side of the house and knock on the door by the kitchen, which nobody ever heard. It was strange. Generally, if you wanted to play, it was best to call him first so he could meet you outside. They did have a separate phone line for the kids, which was kind of an unusual thing to have in the 1970s. Story 30. My mom's boyfriend from when I was about 5 to 12 wouldn't let us have breakfast after around 9 to 9:30 a.m. We would have to wait until lunch if we were late. Us boys, 3 of us plus every other year his son, were banished to the basement so he could mostly pretend we didn't exist and have my mom to himself. It was my mom's house. I called him Dad as my biological father passed away when I was around 2 to 3. There was no goodbye when my mom ended the relationship and he moved out. I was and am friends with his son and was around him after that on occasion. We never talked about it. He passed from COVID-19 a couple of years ago. Story 31. No chores. I am dead serious. My mom was so overprotective she would not let me do any kind of chores. She never let me near appliances or showed me how to do the most basic of housework. The only thing she told me to do was clean my room, but never showed me how to clean it. So my room was always messy. Now I am 25 and had to beg my dad to show me how to use the dishwasher, clothes washer, dryer, and oven. I can wash things and make frozen things in the oven. That is all I can do. I am still scared of the stove. And now I cannot get my mom to show me anything because she has been dead for 11 years. Story 32. No shoes were allowed on a table ever. If you bought new shoes in a box, in a bag, and you put them on a table, my mom would lose her temper. She claimed that it was bad luck and that someone you knew or loved would die as a result. Story 33. When my wife, then girlfriend, and I moved in together, she lit a candle that was on our coffee table. I was like, "What the heck are you doing?" At that moment, it dawned on me that some people actually burn candles, as opposed to having them just for decoration like my mom. Story 34. First, I had to ask for permission, then I had to wait until the toilet door was unlocked. My mother would then stand by the open toilet door until I sat down. I would then hand her the toilet paper. Mother would tear off 3 squares and hand them to me. That's all I was allowed. If I needed more, my parents took it as a sign that I was eating and drinking too much. Story 35. No morning showers allowed because apparently it costs more to shower in the morning compared to showering at night. As an adult with my own home and children, I couldn't care less when they bathe, just as long as it happens. Also, there is almost zero difference in water usage between morning and night at my house. Story 36. We had a lot of food rules, probably what led to my eating disorder in high school. No gum, no candy, no fast food, no processed foods. It's not an awful thing on the surface, but my parents were extreme with it and obsessed with being thin and having thin daughters. Also, no television on Sunday, some weird church rule. Story 37. Don't ask Grandpa about his grandfather. After he passed, we researched our ancestry, and there is literally no record beyond my great-grandfather. Like, what happened? No one would ever talk about it. Story 38. Not me, but my dad who grew up on a farm in Kansas with his 6 other siblings. His grandmother believed in the idea that children should be seen and not heard. If Dad and his siblings were in the house while she was there, they had to quietly sit on the couch in the living room, so they usually would find a field or something and head out to play there.